I've got a question for you. What do Desmond Tutu, Jesse James, Henry Ford, and Jonas Salk have in common? I'll have the answer in a moment. Stay tuned for this special edition of Paths to the Present. Hi, I'm Barbara Grunbaum, producer of Paths to the Present, standing in today for Gail Street. Did you know that March 21st was History Day in Montgomery County? What's History Day? Well, it's a countywide competition for student historians. Middle and high schoolers are recommended by their schools to attend, hoping that their projects will win at the county level. Those that do go on to the state competition. It's kind of like playoffs for secondary school historians. The projects can be papers, exhibits, performances, and even documentaries. While all the projects of this year were excellent, we can't profile every one. So we've narrowed it down to the documentaries produced by high school students. There's a lot of ground to cover, so let's get right to it. Jonas Salk, Desmond Tutu, Henry Ford, and Jesse James. These notable figures caught the attention of some local high school students as they were developing ideas for their History Day project. They and nearly 300 other students worked all year getting ready for the big event. Emily Carell has coordinated History Day in Montgomery County since 1989. She explains what it's all about.
Well, History Day is like a science fair for history students. It's when students research a topic related to the theme of the year, and then they organize their findings, come to a conclusion, and present it in either the form of a paper, an exhibit, a website, a documentary, or performance. They have to have come to an evaluation. They can't just present facts. They show up very excited and compete against others of their own age group. They talk to the judges, make their point that yes, this is why we chose this topic, this is the kind of research we did, we actually did it, and this is why we think we've done a good project.
Councilmember Mark Elrich has a degree in history from the University of Maryland, where he taught U.S. history as a grad student. He explains why history programs like these are so important.
So it's important that students do this because they will grow up to be adults, and hopefully you take a broader, more educated perspective about the society you live in and then apply that to the kind of decisions you make as adults, particularly political decisions.
This year's theme was The Individual in History, Actions and Legacy. The students who chose to work in the documentary format could not exceed 10 minutes, and they had to submit a process paper explaining how they went about producing their project. Students can work together in the group documentary category, or they could work alone and enter as an individual. Lily Alexander and Sarah Gregerman are both juniors at Montgomery Blair High School. They chose to work together, focusing on Bishop Desmond Tutu.
I wanted to participate in History Day because I'm really excited about history, and I really think that there's a lot that we can learn from the past in order to make the world a better place today.
And I thought it was a great opportunity to learn about history outside of the classroom, which can sometimes get a little boring. So I think it was a cool way to see kind of not living history, but to kind of get to view it from a different perspective. So
Desmond Tutu was one of the most vocal critics of apartheid, challenging and denouncing the actions of the South African government and mobilizing both blacks and whites to peacefully promote change in South Africa. Bishop Desmond Tutu is rarely spoken of in reference to South African apartheid when the topic is mentioned in school. However, without knowing of Bishop Desmond Tutu and his work to end apartheid, it is nearly impossible to understand the history and current situation of South Africa.
It was kind of shocking to me that in my sort of 12 years of elementary, middle, and high school education that I had no really idea how instrumental Bishop Desmond Tutu was in ending apartheid and in sort of forging the fight for social and economic justice in South Africa and ultimately throughout the world. And so as we continued to learn about this, I kept sort of thinking to myself, well, how does this not merit a spot in our curriculum?
Tutu was frequently taunted for the color of his skin, and he often witnessed the mistreatment and humiliation of his parents because they were black. As he grew older and explored different career paths, such as medicine and education, Tutu turned to religion in order to spread the word of God. One of the things I learned was how difficult it was to make even a 10-minute long documentary, because when you think about it, 10 minutes is not very long, but the time it takes to put that much information together and all of that footage and integrate it really well so it's very cohesive is very difficult. In addition, Tutu helped pave the way for a more peaceful transition between the apartheid system and a democratic society through negotiations and as leader of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Although South Africa is still a nation in turmoil, the end of apartheid brought new hope and opportunities for the country. Apartheid could not have ended without the work and commitment of Bishop Desmond Tutu.
Sasha Tico and Devin Murtha are sophomores at Walter Johnson High School. Their project examined the outlaw Jesse James. They explain why their subject fits the National History Day theme.
So we picked a figure that we thought was really interesting and complex and left behind a really distinct legacy, which he did, and he wasn't a traditional hero.
People have this idea of him that he's like this Robin Hood type character. He's kind of like a hero, a common man. So we thought it would be interesting to explore the idea that Jesse James has almost a false legacy.
He robbed from the railroads, which were hated in the South as railroad executives seized land from Southerners, often unjustly. It was believed that his stolen wealth was redistributed to the poor, and he was seen as a humanitarian. Jesse's adventures, which included a series of robberies, murders, and dramatic escapes, were published throughout the country, making him a glorified celebrity to many bitter ex-Confederates. To them, he represented Southern anti-Union sentiments and the valor of the South.
He wasn't, the Robin Hood character. He was pretty selfish and greedy. He kept most of his, the money that he stole, and he didn't give it to the poor like most people thought. And he was actually trying to, I think, at the beginning he was trying to further the Civil War kind of in the Southern cause, but then it kind of just became for himself, and so he wasn't really the hero that people think he is.
Jesse James had serious psychological problems and was heavily addicted to morphine. Many of his associates revealed that he had psychopathic tendencies, probably a result of his troubled childhood. His dysfunctional family life, the abuse by Union soldiers as a boy, and the gruesome images he witnessed during his time as a guerrilla fighter left him seriously disturbed.
I'd never done a documentary before, and I think it's a really interesting medium of art. And I think you can do a lot with it, and I think people get to really see what you see because it's like visual and they get to hear it, and it really gives us a chance to explain what we thought to people, and I thought the most effective way.
Yes, he was a callous man, a murderer, and a thief, but he was also deeply disturbed, scarred by a childhood rooted in controversy and death. A religious man, he believed he was fighting to prolong a fading rebel cause against the establishment. Despite a history shrouded by debate, Jesse James, the man and the myth, remains an icon of rebellion in American history.
Robin Banerjee also attends Walter Johnson High School, where he is a sophomore. He chose Henry Ford as his subject.
Well, I knew a bit about Henry Ford to begin with, that he did the assembly line and the Model T and all of that. He made the cars accessible to everyone. He did a lot of mechanical work with the four-step engine. And he also did a lot of social work programs. He instituted the $5 a day program, and which didn't quite last through the Depression, but it was a novel idea at the time, and nowadays we still have a minimum wage. So Henry Ford was someone who really made the United States what it is today because he did so many things.
Henry Ford was an inveterate tinkerer. Even in his youth, he couldn't stay away from the mechanical industry for long. By the age of 16, he was employed building streetcars for the Michigan Car Company Works. In 1888, though he was married to Clara Bryant and settled on his father's farm, the 25-year-old Ford had no interest in growing crops, much to the consternation of his family. 3 years later, he moved to Detroit to accept an engineering job at Thomas Edison's Illuminating Company and quickly gained a prominent position in the company.
I started with a lot of research, of course. The script, I felt, was the most important thing to begin with. But after that, I saw that there was so much more. I've got pictures, and I've got videos, and I've got my own voiceover, and the whole thing comes together to tell a story. And what I really like is that part, that I can make someone's life a story through all of the different media that I can put into a video.
But the Ford factory on Piquette Avenue in Detroit did not have the capacity for Ford's dreams. In 1910, production moved to a brand new plant in the Detroit neighborhood of Highland Park, and it was there that Ford revolutionized the history of manufacturing. 2 years after the Highland Park plant opened, Henry Ford's pièce de résistance was completed, a 250-foot-long conveyor belt upon which the new Ford machine was built. It required a team of 84 workers to complete a single Model T, each performing one single step in the production of the car before the conveyor moved the chassis to the next worker.
Walter Johnson's sophomore, Katie Levingston, created her documentary on Jonas Salk. She describes how much she learned in the process.
I really didn't know that much about polio and the disease, and I think I first had to figure out what the disease was, and I learned that it was a crippling disease and really hurt a lot of people. Poliomyelitis, or polio as it is most commonly known, is a terrifying disease that struck in epidemic proportions from the late 1800s to the mid-1900s. It left thousands dead, paralyzed, or with atrophied limbs that created lifelong disability. And then once I knew the magnitude of the disease, I learned about Salk himself, and then I learned about the vaccine, the making of it, and how there had to be a lot of trials, and how there were obstacles, but still they overcame them, and just the whole story.
Then in 1954, a vaccine to prevent paralytic polio, developed by Dr. Jonas Salk, a grantee of the National Foundation, was tested in the largest field trials in medical history. Finally, April 12, 1955, Salk vaccine safe, effective. The next challenge, commercial production of the polio vaccine in quantity.
I am glad I participated in National Today because it was just a process that I really learned a lot from. I learned that someone can really affect the world, and Jonas Salk really did that. His vaccine showed people that if you work hard enough and that if you do enough research, you can really have an impact, and it can really have a lasting effect.
In 1955, over 10 million children received one or more injections of Salk vaccine, including this boy, the president's own grandson, David Eisenhower.
In April 1955, Dr. Salk received the U.S. Medal of Merit from President Eisenhower. Jonas Salk said, "To a scientist, fame is neither an end nor even a means to an end. The reward of a thing well done is the opportunity to do more."
32 students competed at the state level this year. While unfortunately none of our senior documentarians won at that level, a few of the others did. We're listing their names on the screen. All of us at Paths to the Present congratulate these talented and hard-working students. They definitely deserve a round of applause. Well, that's all the time we have for this show. If you have comments for us or ideas for future shows, send an email to paths.present@verizon.net. Be sure and tune in again next time as Paths to the Present takes you on a walking tour of historic Garrett Park. See you then.